I'd like to bring up our next presenter. Chuck Brokish is the Director of Automotive Business Development at Green Hills Software. He has over 30 years of experience in mobile communications, automotive, active noise control, infotainment, ADAS, and V2X embedded systems. He has over 25 years experience in the embedded security arena. Chuck has been very active on advisory councils and industry forums and standards committees, including ISO, SAE, IEEE, MIPI, and the global platform. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chuck Brokish right here.
Okay, as stated, Chuck Brokish, thank you for being here. So I want to talk a bit about safety and security for the embedded processors. So a little bit of background on where I come from, who we are. Green Hills is a software company that is focused on embedded security, embedded safety. Started over 40 years ago as a compiler company, but we do a lot more than that, which I'll get into. We focus on those industries that are critical to safety and security, where frankly, software failure is not an option, because if the software were to fail, there's a likelihood that people are going to die. So we focus on those markets where we need to ensure the safety and the security, that being military, aerospace, rail, medical, and of course automotive, where my focus is. So support and what we do for some of the Andes cores. We have a full integrated debugging environment that allows development and debug of code, including ASIL qualified C compilers, supporting multi-core debugging. We have hardware debugging capabilities from JTAG all the way up through high-speed trace probes. And we have operating systems, as I mentioned here earlier, that are focused on not only microcontrollers, but also microprocessors. And of course, with RISC-V having the ability to create solutions that are scalable, we see microcontroller type solutions for the low-end devices to applications processors on the more capable high-end requirements. So we are not new to the RISC-V market. We have been involved with RISC-V since 2018. Started doing development in 2018. Have our C and C++ compilers development and started in 2018. The Green Hills probe for JTAG and trace work in 2018. In 2020, we came out with our first customer delivery of the full integrated debugging environment and debugging tools. In 2020, we announced MicroVelocity, which is the operating system focused on the microcontroller-based type of devices, and then released our tools for the integrated debugging environment with certification for industrial, rail, automotive applications. Soon thereafter, releasing the MicroVelocity operating system for the microcontroller lower end devices, and announced Integrity, which is our operating system for the higher end applications processors, with prototypes that came out already in 2021. If any of you happened to be in Detroit a couple of weeks ago for Autotech, you may have seen we were demonstrating the operating system running on the devices at Detroit as well. As I mentioned, we're also not new to the development environment of embedded processing. We have over 50 architectures that we support. As I noted that we had started over 40 years ago in the compiler space. Our compiler experience ranges from the very simple devices to the very complex devices. RISC-V, of course, being in there as well here as under the RISC cores. With that safety and security focus, as I mentioned, we are focused on automotive, industrial, medical, rail, etc. Our operating system has actually been certified at the highest level of safety and highest level of security of any operating system in the world. We actually have EAL 6+ security certification on the operating system, which no other operating system can claim. And let's see, all right. The operating system, as I noted here, is a safety element out of context, so we have microcontrollers as well as microprocessors. We do certification support, so all the customers that are looking to create their own cores on RISC-V and develop applications and then get it through safety. We have experts where we have done this not only for military and aerospace. If you think automotive or industrial type devices are tough, try passing devices through the FAA, which we've done dozens of times. It's a very tough process, but we do understand functional safety and security. So I mentioned the compiler capabilities. Since 1982, we've been doing compilers. We are industry leader on those compilers, including the RISC-V, which I'll get into here in a bit. Maximizing code efficiency and minimizing code size. And of course, with our background on safety and security, making sure all the while to never introduce anything that could create security vulnerabilities inside of the code itself. We run our code through almost 4 million compiler tests every night as we make any changes and updates to the capabilities. So we have full support for all the base level instructions within the RISC-V, as well as all of the, listed here are all of the extensions that I believe are available. You'll see that there's 2 or 3 in there that are in progress or planning right now, but the rest of them are already supported within the compiler capabilities. In addition, because RISC-V is in fact the device that you can customize and build your own instructions into it, we have the ability to accommodate OEM-specific instructions. So the way we do that, we have 2 options to do that. The user defines a new assembly instruction, and then this works well for prototyping, in which you can put it directly into the code as an assembly instruction. Or you can do, if you want it more optimized to within the code, you can create an intrinsic and build that directly into our tool chain so that we can recognize and optimize around it. That is supported by our Green Hills debugger and simulator, and the compiler can take advantage of the resources that are being used and optimize it. On the debug and trace side, we have capabilities for ntrace as well as the Ultra SoC trace. If you take a look at the intrinsics, as I mentioned, you can create a configuration file which defines your intrinsics for those extensions that go beyond the baseline and extensions of RISC-V to define your own instructions. After you create the configuration file, that gets pulled into our compiler, and the compiler is able to recognize that intrinsic, integrates it into the assembler, and then the disassembler, when you're debugging, can recognize that instruction and show that back as your instructions within the disassembly. So as I mentioned, we focus on not only safety and security, but on the compiler side, we focus on code optimization for performance. You can see some numbers here showing our performance versus LLVM as well as the GCC compiler. Performance certainly looking good on the fast on the cycle, and of course on the size as well. We reduce the size in almost all cases. So again, I mentioned the nightly regression on the code. So we are running this code through almost 4 million tests every night to make sure that we're meeting all safety and security requirements and not creating any new issues. So the integrated debugging environment that I mentioned, we have a fully integrated debugging environment that goes from supports a single debug session across multiple cores, whether those are homogeneous or heterogeneous cores. We have a capability called Time Machine, which actually allows you to run backwards in time based on trace or simulation events. understanding how you got to an erroneous point in code. You can actually back up your trace mechanisms and see what the registers were before you got to that instruction. It actually works a lot like a DVR almost, where you can back up, go forward, back up, go frame by frame, step down into your assembly instructions and find out just where the bug is in your code. It is OS agnostic, but also supports OS capability and awareness for Integrity, Microvelocity, Linux, AutoSAR, and other languages or operating systems. In our automotive focus, we have full MISRA C compliance. We have DoubleTree, which allows us to go back and check for static code analysis. We have dynamic code analysis capabilities as well within the code. We do support built-in instruction simulator, flash programming, and other capabilities within the codes for your prototyping, your early development teams. So example SOCs we've got support for. As I showed you the list before of the many different architectures we have, architectures that we can support that include RISC-V as well as ARM, microcontroller type cores as well as application type cores, all over a single JTAG interface, all through a single instance of user interface. So we can recognize the multiple cores even though they're different ISAs running on the same target and running through the same JTAG trace port or JTAG debug port. So our multi-integrated debugging environment really supports three powerful capabilities for debug and optimization. Time machine, as I mentioned earlier, you'll see the oval around it here in the top, where you can go through your code and go forward and back in code to debug some of the most difficult bugs, understand where you came from, back up to when the code was correct, and then step into where the bug exists and debug it. History view shows you a detailed view of the call stack and the applications, what function is calling another function, so you can see exactly how you got where you are, recognizing when things are halted and stalled and blocked, and see your complete code flow. And then debug snapshot allows you, as you're doing development across teams, which we're seeing many of our customers do far more worldwide development teams. You can debug an application, actually take a snapshot of the entire scenario in the debug scenario, save it, ship it off to another debug member or development member anywhere in the world, and allow them to load that exact same view of the application and work on their side. So when we have multiple capabilities inside of software with multiple teams across the world, this is a very effective way of being able to debug through teams that are scattered around the world. The Integrity RTOS, as I mentioned, a safe and secure foundation. So on devices that have MMU, we separate the applications and the tasks all into their own memory space. So they're all running in a separate address space. This is a proven separation kernel. This is how we get the EAL6+ on the security. What this gives is guaranteed freedom from interference, exercises mandatory access control to make sure that the one application cannot interfere with the operation of another. If you do have one task in which you have a bug in a piece of code, it cannot negatively impact the other applications that are running. It's all based on an Integrity real-time operating system, uses synchronous multiprocessing so that we can leverage all of the cores that are available. With all of these cores running in their own virtual address space, that is a form of virtualization. Virtualization is a term that has become far more common just recently as people talk more about hypervisors and thinking that it is a new capability. But in fact, we've been doing virtualization through running all of these applications in their own address space since the 1990s. But we've actually been doing hypervisors for 20 years now. We have applications in which we simply run the guest operating system as another application running in its own virtual address space. So we put the virtual machine into that virtual address space and allow the operating system to run at a low level. Now, when you go for safety certification on a system like this, it makes it far easier to get certification because you have a certified RTOS at the low-level software and your security or your safety application running on top of it, and the certification becomes much cleaner than running a 100,000 or a million line hypervisor at the low level, which makes it very difficult to certify an application like that. Within that, we realize that the software that we provide is not fully comprehensive. There's a lot of software that goes into these complex systems. So we have the runtime foundation that we provide through the RTOSs and the hypervisors at a low level. That gives you a safe and secure foundation to be able to build applications on top of. We do provide other capabilities like the safety certified runtime libraries, virtualization services, networking stacks and file systems, etc. But then we also rely on partners for things like OTA, AutoSAR solutions, crypto capabilities, CAN stacks, AutoSAR, as I mentioned, various capabilities, and of course the applications get built at the top level by the end customer. Our microvelocity operating system, as I mentioned, is what's focused more toward the microcontroller environment. In this case, this is a very small microkernel. Also has ASIL-D certification for automotive, SIL 3 and 4 for industrial and rail applications. Very tight kernel for applications that have very strict time requirements and on performance limited processors where you perhaps don't have the application processor in there, but it's really running more as a microcontroller. We got plenty more information out here if you want to read up more on what we've done with Andes in particular, and various other releases here that you can talk to me afterward if you'd like, but there are links that you can look to find what we've been doing with RISC-V since 2018. Other than that, just to summarize, we do have 40 years of industry-proven embedded software experience. We've been a pioneer in RISC-V development, as I said, since 2018 doing development. We are the only real-time operating system suitable for safe and secure production systems on both 32-bit and 64-bit systems. And we have a global team, offices all over the world. And I think that is it. Be glad to take any questions.
Any questions for Chuck? We'll stick around, and
Chuck will be
Chuck will be.
I'll be out at the lobby if you have any questions.
Yes. Thank you so much.